years. Got a bunch of guys that are going to, be future, players here for us and really good players at Penn State. Felt like, we did a lot in terms of being balanced across the board. There's a few spots that we'll probably continue to look for here come February, and then also on the transfer market. In terms of the challenges, we all face them. Everybody in college football faced the challenges with COVID, and I think across the world we're all facing the difficulties of it. But like anything in life, you got to handle those challenges head on. One of the great things about Penn State is when a kid comes on campus, he gets the feel of how special this place really truly is. The people here, the environment here, our coaching staff as well, and that's missing a little bit in an era when you're only able to do Zoom calls. But we did a bunch of them. Felt like we were able to hold on to a class that was pretty well kind of along its way as the COVID things started. And then kind of picked up steam, right? As things got going there, and did a good job of keeping these guys, connected to our staff, talking to our staff all the way through the process, coaches, support staff, recruiting staff, strength coaches, nutritionists, academic staff, all those people we were in close contact with all the way through. And then the other piece is the younger classes, being able to expand our reaches. It's interesting, the one thing it's a little bit different. It's very challenging on the senior class, the 21 class, in terms of being able to get those connections to get a kid to say yes and ultimately sign with you. But it actually kind of opened up some avenues for some younger kids in the sense that wherever the kid was in the country, he was as close to us as he was to anywhere else. So I think our pool it's pretty good because now where they might have been taking a visit on a Saturday somewhere closer to home, now we were able to get them on a Zoom call with our staff and different groups in our organization, and so now we're maybe realistic options for them going forward.
Ryan Sutter, BWI.
Andy, thanks for the time. Can you just talk a little bit about having all your guys at camp this year or last year, and just having that base? I think a good chunk of your class camped, and then of course just how hard was it then finding accurate information over the next year? Just what did that do for you guys having all those guys in camp?
Yeah, obviously you guys have seen over the years we've placed a huge emphasis on getting kids to camp. Couple reasons for it. From an evaluation standpoint, it's a major factor for us in being able to feel comfortable that they check all the boxes physically as football players. In this class, in the end, it isn't that much different. Over half of the class was here for camps. And I think that's an important piece of it. But it was a challenge in the sense that we probably would have had more guys that on this list that would have come to camp had we been able to have them for this past summer. In terms of being able us to evaluate them, and also for them to be able to evaluate us. We feel confident if a kid comes here and our coaching staff gets to be around them for a day in camp, they get to see what it's like to play for that coach, and I think that's a huge value in the recruiting process. Look forward to getting back to the days when we can have camp hopefully this summer. It's a significant part of how we operate as a staff.
Sean Fitz, Lions 247. Greg Pickle, you're on deck.
Hey, Andy, thanks for taking the time. The beard's coming in nicely, by the way. You mentioned the transfer portal a little bit earlier, kind of things changing there with the rules and the immediate eligibility. How does that change your approach as a staff to handling the transfer portal, and what are you guys thinking in terms of hitting that in the next couple of months?
Yeah, the transfer portal has obviously changed things dramatically in college football. In terms of everybody seeing it to start with. When the transfer portal came into place a couple of years ago, now the whole world sees who's on the market, if you will. The big change that we think is likely to happen here shortly is that kids will have immediate eligibility, and that's going to be another ramp up to what the transfer portal means. I think we all kind of realize that in the past, for us at Penn State, transfers were not a big part of our overall recruiting process. That will change. We're not going to make a full-time living in terms of all of our players are going to come from the transfer portal by any stretch of the imagination. We're still going to, do the majority of our recruiting from the high school ranks. but we're going to be active. There's in the transfer portal, and we're going to be looking for guys that can help us, fill gaps. And then also, in addition to filling gaps that we may have on our roster, create competition. We're looking for guys that are going to come in here that have maybe been other places. Some may have had the success they wanted somewhere else, and now are trying to, move up, if you will. Others may not have had the, the early success that they hoped for, but still have, bright futures. We hope to bring those guys in here and have them be, competition for the guys on the roster that also fill some voids. I think the other aspect of the transfer portal that's interesting, when you recruit a high school kid, you are getting someone who at the vast majority of positions you're going to develop into a player that you want him to be. On the transfer portal, he may already be along the way to who he is as a player, being in the college weight room, being physically advanced. It's a big adjustment. You talk to anybody that plays college football, no matter how good you are, how talented you may be, that freshman year, it's a big adjustment. You're going against grown men. Whereas you take someone in the transfer portal from another school who has that foundation, that base, they're a little bit older. They have a chance to jump in right away and be competitive in terms of roster spots, in terms of being able to get starting roles. So there's going to be those older guys that may come in and be on your roster for 1 to 2 years, and they fill those voids. And then you're going to have the other ones that, unfortunately, it's probably going to be a lot of kids because of the immediate eligibility that we expect, that they may not have the freshman experience that they wanted somewhere else, and now they're going to be looking around, and we're going to still have to groom them up. So it's kind of twofold. You're looking at the older guys, the kind of quick fixes, and still the younger guys to continue to develop. And so it provides an opportunity for us. Again, like I said, we will still primarily recruit from high schools, but when it's good, beneficial to us, we'll go to that transfer portal and try and find some guys.
Let's go to Greg Pickle, Penn Live, and Audrey Snutter. You're on deck.
Andy, thanks for your time. Where do you guys think you're at in terms of space now moving into February? And how does both the extra year of eligibility for your guys because of the COVID rule that they can take advantage of, and also the likelihood of the one-time transfer rule passing impact that?
Yeah, so the guys that, the seniors that can come back, fortunately, the way the NCAA has it set up, they will not count against our 85 number, max number for next year. So that allows us to, in terms of space available, not factor them in, not worry about are they taking a space, because they won't take a space. What they will do, if we do have some guys that decide they want to come back, is they'll be, where our holes on our roster may be. Obviously, if the guy comes back that you weren't expecting to come back, you may be stronger at a position than you otherwise were thinking. So if we're still moving forward in February looking for, additional guys, whether, again, it's transfer portal or whether it's high school guys, a position of somebody that comes back, you might not have to place much emphasis on it because you have that fixed. On the flip side, if someone leaves for the NFL, now because of the immediate eligibility, you have quicker solutions to someone who you may or may not have known was going to be leaving for you. In terms of projecting the numbers, we're going to be like everybody else in the country. We're going to be monitoring it and trying to figure out. We're having conversations with our guys now to try and get a feel for where they're at. We'll know very shortly. Where a good number of them are thinking that we're going to have guys that are going to decide they want to transfer elsewhere, or if they're going to leave for the draft. So we'll, coming out of this here, coming out of our last couple games, we'll have a feel for where our exact needs are at.
Go to Audrey Snutter, The Athletic, and Rich Garcella. You're on deck.
Hey, Andy, appreciate the time. I'm just wondering, obviously, it was such a big year in Pennsylvania. Why do you think Pennsylvania was such a challenge for you guys this year? And I know camps obviously are super important to what you do, but do you think Penn State could potentially stand to offer kids earlier in-state in the process, or is that something you guys want to try to reevaluate?
We're continually evolving, as a staff and trying to figure out the best ways to recruit Pennsylvania and recruit the rest of the country for that matter. I think if you follow along closely, we probably have got more offers out now in the younger classes than we did in previous classes. There's a variety of reasons for that. An element of it is being a little bit more aggressive early on, and a little bit of it is we feel like these upcoming classes have a more deeper pool of players here in the state. We're in a state that is got great high school football, but the reality is the numbers in the state have gone down a little bit over time, not every year, but it kind of cycles up and cycles down. So there's a premium in the years where there's not as many top end guys that we feel confident in. You've got to hit on them, and we realize that we've got to hit on those guys. And it's a challenge when you don't. And obviously it's frustrating to us if we do miss. But in years where they're bigger, you want to make sure you hit that high percentage again, and we feel like we're on the track to do that in the future.
Let's go to Rich Garcello, Reading Eagle, and Tyler Donahue. You're on deck.
Andy, thanks for your time. I want to follow up on Audrey's question. So, in the 21 cycle, what did you learn or what didn't you do well with regards to the top prospects in Pennsylvania? And what have you applied? You've obviously got a good start on the 22 class with kids in state. What have you applied to that group?
Well, just to start with, we've offered more guys early on in the process. I think that's an element of it. I think there's a variety of reasons. I think we all look for, hey, this is the reason. We've done, over the course of time, over our time here, we've done very well in the state as an aggregate. But there's going to be some peaks and some valleys. Every kid is different. And obviously we've had some really top end kids, a couple of top end kids that have gotten out of the state. We can't allow that to happen. We've got to look at each of those cases individually and figure, okay, in the future when we have a similar type kid, what is it about his recruitment that is going to make him pick Penn State or pick somewhere else? And that's kind of what we do. We go back and we analyze how it's played out in the past and what we want to do for the future.
Tyler Donahue, Lions 247, and John Petishnock. You're on deck.
Hi, Andy. Thank you for your time. You guys are preparing for Big Ten football, but I think you're only maybe 4 weeks away from having several new freshmen on campus and joining this roster. Given the circumstances, what kind of an early enrollee experience can that class anticipate? And if there's a spring practice or not, regardless, what do you think they can gain from that first semester on campus?
Yeah, whether we have spring ball or not, we're obviously hoping that we do. They're going to gain the experience in the weight room. It's a chance to get on campus, get trained like they've never been trained before. And regardless of how classes have been, it's going to be a different experience. COVID's been a different experience for everybody. If you were a high school senior this year, you had a different senior year of football of classes than any other senior that we can recall in history. And it'll be the same thing for mid-years. They may come in here and they may be doing a bunch of online classes, and those will be challenges for them. But it's always a challenge when you arrive on campus, and so they'll make that their normal, and they'll figure out how to work through it. And we're going to help develop them as players and as people along the way. We feel real confident in our development staff here. Coach Galt and his crew do a great job with these guys, both from a weightlifting standpoint, but also a running standpoint. They'll be in better condition than they've ever been in their life, and they'll be closer to being able to play for us. It's still a challenge, even for mid-year enrollees, to play as true freshmen, but these guys will have definitely a leg up on the rest of the class in terms of being able to play early.
John Petishnock, the football letter, and Nubias Wilborn. You're on deck.
Hey, good afternoon, Andy. Appreciate your time today. Hey, the football team incorporates some videos from alumni on the social media channels today, Keegan-Michael Key, Lara Spencer, among others. What's the impact of the Penn State Alumni Network in recruiting, not just for the recruits, but for their families and also for their parents especially?
Yeah, obviously Penn State's Alumni Association is the largest and most powerful in the world. I think that's something for us, for our kids as they graduate. It is a huge benefit for them as they leave here. And I think they realize that coming in. The kids that typically pick a place like Penn State, they're looking at more than just the football field. And that alumni support for their future in their career, whether it's if they play in the NFL or after the NFL. We all realize that the guys that play in the NFL, they're going to have a career after that. They may have enough money to retire, but they're not going to probably retire right after they're done playing ball. And so having those connections, it's really special to see how much people care about this place, and what that means for people down the road, the connections, the job opportunities, just that fraternity of Penn State. and the parents really, like you said, they gravitate to that because they understand. As a kid, as a high school kid, you don't know what it's going to be like to be 40. You don't know what it's like to be 30 and looking for a job, but your parents do because they went through that, and so that resonates with them. The Alumni Association, the Alumni Network that we have here. I think one really interesting aspect of all of this is that as we get into name, image, and likeness, it's going to be an even bigger factor for us on the recruiting side. It was important in the past and it's always been important, but it's going to be a bigger factor moving forward than it's ever been because the community, the Penn State community, whether it's lettermen, whether it's alumni, whether it's fans, are going to have a bigger impact on our recruitment than they've ever had before with name, image, and likeness, in the sense that those connections, those social media followers, there's a value to that for us in recruiting. And it's one that you don't necessarily put a dollar value on, but in terms of our ability to recruit kids, we've got a great setup here for it. But at the same time, we can't rest on our laurels and say just because we have this huge network, that it's just going to automatically work for us. We're going to be calling on the alumni to help us throughout this process and helping us recruit kids.
Goodbye, this is Wilbur, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Mike Foreman, you're on deck.
Well, Andy, first of all, hello, good to meet you. Thanks for the time.
You as well.
And you actually led me right into the question I was going to ask you. What are some of the ways you could probably even elaborate a little bit more on the name, image, and license and stuff? How I know technically this year you can't fully enact it, but what kind of infrastructure you set up to get it going for when it does become a thing, and how important is that going forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. Still, we can't use it this year, what you mentioned. Still very fluid because the rules in terms of what exactly it's going to look like aren't set yet. So there's an element of you have a plan, but that plan has to be flexible. I think the key things, going forward is what do we have that is our strength, and then how do we leverage that strength? The Alumni Network, the number of people that care about Penn State and care about Penn State football surpasses really anybody in the country. And to be able to leverage the individual fan, the individual alumni, and their value for us in the recruiting process, whether it's via social media, clicking follow on a prospect or on a player has value for us now in recruiting, whereas in the past it may not have. Having someone who works at a local business in someone's hometown that cares about Penn State, and hey, we may have a small commercial if that's something that the NCAA is going to allow. Okay, well, I'm going to think about the Penn State player that's from our hometown. Let's get him on to be our spokesman for a 30-second spot. All of those things, making sure that everybody understands the importance of it, and then reaching out and trying to make sure that our kids, and there's going to be some elements of how much can we be involved, or can we be involved at all, but making sure our players know what those avenues are, who's out there to potentially facilitate that for them in the future.
Let's go to Mike Foreman with StateCollege.com and Peter Terpstra. You're on deck.
Thanks, Greg. Andy, how much credence do you put into national rankings?
Good question. What I would say is, as a whole, I think they're really good. I think the recruiting services do a great job of recruiting, or not recruiting, but evaluating prospects as an overall group. Obviously, we have to look at each individual kid separately, and how do they fit us? What do we see in that individual prospect? So do we, hey, this kid's ranked this, so we have to offer them? Absolutely not. But do they have it, pretty well down in terms of the overall group of the kids in the country? Yes. And we follow along as much or more than anybody to find out who those kids are, and trying to figure out, okay, should we offer this kid? If a school, let's just pick a small school in Florida, offers a kid in Florida, we may not be as familiar with that kid, but we need to look at him. If that kid gets a ranking out of Florida or wherever, we need to look at that kid. So yeah, we put a good amount of credence in it in terms of the aggregate, not necessarily the individual.